All right, so the video we're going to be looking at here is not particularly new. However, it's also not very old. It's from, I think, like a month ago or something like that. But what we're going to be looking at here, Ben Shapiro is going to attempt to essentially debunk Alexandria Ocasio Cortez by saying that what you're proposing costs just far too much money than we have to spend. And let's check it out.
Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. The reason Republicans are talking about her is because the Democrats have propped her up as the supposed next wave of brainiacs inside the Democratic Party. And not only that, because it is good for us to talk about her. Because I hope that she's the face of the Democratic Party. I hope that their new face is the Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez wing. The worst thing that could happen for Republicans is for them to run a candidate like Joe Biden. The worst thing that could happen for Republicans is for them to run somebody who can purport to be moderate just long enough to become president of the United States or become senator or congressperson. I'm hoping the Democrats make a big boo-boo here, and they are so blasted out of their mind by Trump's presidency that they move to make Alexandria Ocasio Cortez their darling. Okay, so she was asked yesterday again on Pod Save America, a podcast run by the Obama Bros, right? I mean, it's a bunch of Obama people who are running that podcast, and they love her because secretly she represents their id. And she says all the dumb things they wish they could say, but then their super ego kicks in and they say, perhaps I should not say this out loud because it's a stupid thing. She doesn't have any brain-to-mouth filter when it comes to this stuff. So she was asked specifically about how she was going to pay for all of her plans. It did not go well.
You know, they say, how are you going to pay for it? As though they haven't used these same ways to pay for unlimited wars, to pay for trillion-dollar tax cuts and tax cut extensions. They use these mechanisms to pay for these things all the time. They only want to know, it just seems like their pockets are only empty when we're talking about education and investing in human capital in the United States, education, healthcare, housing, and investing in the middle class. All of a sudden, you know, there's nothing left. All of a sudden, the wealthiest nation in the world we're just totally scarce. And we have complete scarcity when it comes to the things that are most important.
Okay, so I do love the fact, and the original question here was, how do you pay for things? And her answer is, nobody pays for things. Thank you, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, for that brilliant exposition on the debt and deficit in the United States. By the way, when she says things like, the only thing we invest in is tax cuts and wars, that's all we invest in. This year, we will spend $4.3 trillion. The federal government will spend $4.3 trillion this year. What percentage of that goes to the military? Any guesses? Any guesses in the room? Any guesses? What percentage of that $4.3 trillion goes to the American military establishment, including the vets? How much of that? Senya, you got a guess? What percent? Okay, Senya says 60 goes to the military. Jess, any guesses on what percentage of the American federal budget goes to the military? Jess? 30. Okay. The answer is 16% of the federal budget goes to the American military. The remainder goes to all of the supposed priorities that we are supposedly ignoring, according to Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. 62% of the entire federal budget goes to mandatory spending under Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. The vast majority goes to social welfare programs that Alexandria Ocasio Cortez says we are spending too little money on. The fact is, the amount of money that we spend per capita in the United States on social welfare programs is actually almost on par with that of the European countries and actually surpasses some of the European countries. And we are spending a buttload of money on all of these priorities that she says we are not spending money on. It's just a lie that we're spending it all on quote-unquote tax cuts. First of all, that's not an expenditure. That's me keeping my own money. And then when she says we're not investing in the middle class, understand that when she says that we're supposed to invest in the middle class, what she means is we're supposed to tax the living hell out of everyone who makes more than 30 grand in the United States, and then we'll pass it back to the people at the lower end of the income spectrum for investment in garbage government programs that do not result in higher productivity, higher wages, or higher employment. That is her actual plan. I would love, when people say, would you debate her? I would love to debate her because I have one question for her. Name an industry you would not nationalize. Which ones should the government not run and why? Right, can she name any of them? I have serious doubts. She says she wants to abolish the profit motive. Okay, well then she's going to have to explain how she abolishes the profit motive without abolishing private industry. Or would she just abolish it? Or why does the Democratic Party think this is a good idea? By the way, when she says that we haven't worried about spending in the past, yes, that's a problem. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans thought it was a problem. I guess now we don't worry about that so much because President Trump's president, so we're supposed to ignore the fact there's a $21 trillion national debt. But that sucker is going to come due. Social Security will be bankrupt in the next decade. Medicare will be bankrupt a decade after that. Okay, these programs are not going to be around. Or if they are around, they're going to require massive cuts or massive taxes. And even so, what I love most, is that she says that, we've never had to worry about spending this sort of money before. The kind of money that she's proposing spending is so insane that it makes what we have spent before absolutely obsolete. According to the Mercatus Center, a libertarian-leaning center at George Mason University, they estimated that Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan, we talked about this last week, would cost the government $32 trillion over the next decade. But we can actually do a budget exercise using nonpartisan and even left-leaning groups. Vox.com, a left-wing source, they talk about what exactly we would have to pay for single-payer health care, a jobs guarantee, and free college. What exactly would it cost? Well, it turns out that it would cost, according to the Tax Policy Center, it would cost legitimately trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. $42.5 trillion in new proposals over the next decade, on top of the $12.4 trillion baseline deficit. To put this in perspective, according to Vox.com, Washington is currently projected to collect $44 trillion in taxes, in revenues, that's what they call it, over the next decade. Okay, the Republican tax cut, the fiscal Armageddon, will cost less than $2 trillion over the next decade. So we're going to spend $44 trillion, but Alexandria Ocasio Cortez says the real problem is those tax cuts that quote unquote cost $2 trillion. What is the 30-year projected tab for these programs that they're talking about? The 30-year projected tab is, I kid you not, $218 trillion on top of an $84 trillion baseline deficit driven by Social Security, Medicare, and the resulting internet costs. Federal spending, which is typically between 18 and 22% of GDP in the United States, would soar past 40% of GDP on its way to 50% of GDP within 3 decades. And she says, oh, well, we've never had to worry about spending before. Well, it turns out if you quadruple the spending, you might have to worry about it a little bit more. If you got a $10,000 credit card debt, and then you decide to rack up another $40,000 of credit card debt, maybe you ought to think about whether the original debt was a good idea, but quadrupling it is an even better idea. Okay, we'd be at 60% of GDP by that point. Okay, within 3 decades. State and local government spending would push the total cost of government, according to Sanders and Ocasio Cortez, all the way to 60% of GDP. 60% of every buck made in the United States would be spent by the federal government, exceeding the current spending level of every single European country. And this is their big idea? This is what they think is going to win them elections? Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, so that entire video clip was just filled with complete garbage, complete bullshit, pretty much every step of the way. So, first of all, he starts out with this sort of conspiracy that the guys from Pod Save America, who were Obama guys, they were basically, I think, like press secretaries in different positions like that within the Obama administration. But he, for some reason, says that there's some, like, he applies this super weird conspiracy theory that, they're they're Marxists, but hey, they can't say that up front. They just think that. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? The Obama administration was massively, barely center-left. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And he always seems to find a way to throw that in, like this weird conspiracy that the Obama people, or really any Democrats, are these like crazy Marxist USSR style socialist lovers. It's fucking creepy and weird, honestly. But he says tax cuts aren't an expenditure. That is true. But what happens to the budget when you apply a tax cut and you don't lower the spending? An increase in deficits and the debt. That's what happens. So yeah, you have to, in order to attempt to balance the budget, what are you going to do? You're literally taking away funding without lowering the spending. So what the fuck are you doing? You're supposed to be the deficit hawks, as we already know. Now, here's the thing. And he again, straw man after straw man after straw man is essentially a pretty good summary of this video. Because Alexandria Ocasio Cortez nor Bernie Sanders want to tax the hell out of people making over 30K. People making over 30K won't be paying much in taxes. So I don't know where the fuck he got that from. So, and then he brings up the debate idea again with Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, which doesn't make any sense for multiple reasons. This is something that, when have you seen a nominee for a congressional seat debate a pundit, especially one as someone like Ben Shapiro, right? Like, you don't have anything to gain there, and it's something that's not precedented. It'd be like Ted Cruz debating someone like, I don't know, some left-wing pundit. I don't know who it would be. But, he says, which industry would you not nationalize, implying that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would nationalize every industry. She wouldn't nationalize a single industry. Not even one. Not a single industry is going to be nationalized by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she's a social democrat. She's using the term democratic socialism because it has now been used interchangeably with social democracy. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez isn't going to nationalize shit. And Ben Shapiro is making this mistake of saying that Bernie Sanders' proposed healthcare system, Medicare for All, is somehow a nationalized system. What the fuck are you talking about? That's not a nationalized system. A nationalized system is what the UK has, where they actually run their hospitals. Medicare for All is providing everyone with an insurance card. Like in Canada, that's essentially what they do. And 83% of their healthcare is privately delivered. So they're essentially giving you an insurance card, and then you go to whatever doctor and you use that card. That's not nationalization of healthcare. What the fuck are you talking about? That the nationalization would be if the government said, we're going to set up our own NHS and we're going to have a national healthcare system where we have these hospitals and we run them. That is what nationalization would be. And I feel like he knows this. I think he's just fucking lying. But he brings up the Mercatus study again while also deceiving the people listening. $2 to $5 trillion would be saved through this system compared to what we have in place now. What we have in place now would result in the spending of $2 trillion or more dollars, because apparently there was the Bernie campaign said, we pulled this program that would save an extra like $3 trillion. So you're talking about a savings of like $5 trillion while also covering every single person in the United States. So again, lie after lie after lie from Ben Shapiro, and it doesn't seem to stop. So here's something that I wanted to talk about. So the job guarantee. The jobs guarantee is something that sounds like this crazy, like communist shit, but that's not what it is at all. A jobs guarantee is some really like boneheaded yes shit. Like, it's so basic. It would be extremely beneficial for the economy and our country as a whole. And it's because a jobs guarantee program is just essentially a expanded form of infrastructure. A jobs guarantee program is infrastructure to the max. Infrastructure is not supposed to be an issue that is partisan. Infrastructure is supposed to be something that's bipartisan, because as a person of the country, you should want the country to improve. You should want infrastructure to improve. You should want, more bridges and, more shit like that. You should want new roads. You should want people to be employed. This was something, I believe it was the WPA, which was one of the alphabet soup programs under FDR. Reagan praised that because he said it was a form of, this program, but it employed people, which is what this would be doing. So Republicans should be happy about this. They should be like, oh, wow, we're going to be able to employ people? That's awesome. And that it is something that's awesome. That's why I fully support a jobs guarantee. And it's some basic-ass shit. This is some FDR basic-ass shit. It's just infrastructure to the max. And the thing about a jobs guarantee is it's spending money, but it's an investment into the economy. Because what happens when you employ people who were previously unemployed? First of all, you stop unemployment benefits because you're paying them enough to live. So you're not paying unemployment benefits anymore because they're employed, and you're paying them enough to live so they're not on social welfare. So you're also not paying the welfare. So you're saving that money, and what you're doing is they're going to be paying money in taxes because they'll be making money, which will increase the income of the government. So it's a legitimate investment into the economy. And generally speaking, lowering the unemployment should be an interest of the government in the first place. That is something that no doubt, quite obviously, improves the nation. So unemployment would be lowered, they would no longer be paid welfare or unemployment, and then they would be paying money in taxes because now they're actually making money. And then we'd have, obviously, increased consumer spending because now they have more money to spend on shit, which is what really, keeps the economy going. Consumer spending. If you put money in the pockets of middle class people, they're going to spend that shit. So that's why jobs guarantee is a great fucking idea. So another thing there, I don't even know if he talks about how the GDP is going to grow. It grows every year, but the jobs guarantee, the GDP from studies have stated that the GDP would grow more than the percentage of GDP it would cost for a jobs guarantee. Because as there's more consumer spending, the GDP will rise. Imagine that. A huge chunk of the population now having money to spend, therefore raising the GDP. That's actually something that will actually raise the GDP, unlike the tax cuts where you give it to billionaires and then they just hoard that shit. They don't actually spend the fucking money. So free college education is something else that he mentions there, as if, here's the thing, contextually speaking, free college is cheap as fuck. Because federally, according to a study, federally it's supposed to only cost $47 billion. But I think combined with the state cost, it would be something like $80 billion, $84 billion a year. The military raised back in September, they raised the military budget by $80 billion annually. So if you were to take that money, over 10 years, you funded free college tuition. Every single year, you've reached that number. Every single year, you've reached that number. That is a joke. Free college education, in the grand scheme of things, in real numbers, is a joke. $80 billion a year? Do you have any idea how minuscule that is? We do that shit on the military all the fucking time. And on top of that, the benefits that come with that are increased consumer spending as well as increased tax revenue for the government. A lot of those people are then going to quickly be able to invest into the economy because they'll be able to buy shit because they won't be bogged down by student loan debt. So they'll, be quicker to buying houses and more quicker to buy anything. And so that'll spur the economy on top of it. So on top of, it being so relatively, easy to fund, on top of that, you're talking about increasing the GDP in turn as well. So it's like, that's just a no-brainer. It's contextually speaking cheap as fuck because we do that shit with the military all the time. Like I said, in September, they raised it $80 billion annually. That would fund it every single year for the next 10 years. $80 billion a year. That military budget raise could have gone to fund free college tuition for an entire decade. An entire fucking decade. Could you imagine how much better people's lives would be who are students, who then can go on to spend money and not be bogged down by student loan debt? Holy shit. That would be an amazing thing. I would absolutely love that. So those are most of the things there that sort of, just goes to show you that that entire shit was just a complete fest of garbage. The healthcare system that is proposed of Medicare for All would save $2 to $5 trillion. And on top of that, free college education, contextually speaking, not only is cheap, but it has massive benefits in turn with it. And the jobs guarantee would increase the GDP more than it would spend GDP. And it is going to work wonders for the economy. And it's basic shit. It's infrastructure. Something that shouldn't be partisan. Infrastructure shouldn't be partisan. That should be bipartisan. So, again, those are all the bullshit pieces in the Ben Shapiro video.